So once again, Whoopi Goldberg is on the hot seat for anti-Semitism, a seat that was most recently occupied by Kanye West, Ye, Kyrie Irving, and then of course Dave Chappelle. So we will examine the statements presented by the rabbi, and we will see if they have any validity, because it seems the blacks and the Jews, according to what he's saying, are playing the game of comparative suffering. So let's examine that and see if it's accurate. Let's go. Start from the very beginning. Before I jump in, let me please remind you to hit that subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Nobody else is going to give you this kind of content. Make sure you like the video, of course, so that the algorithm will be friendly. And of course, share the video. Don't be afraid to share it. People need to hear different points of views and keep an open mind when these things come about and not just believe what the media is spreading. Let's go.
Joining me now is Rabbi Shmuley Batayek. Now, on yesterday's show, we covered how Whoopi Goldberg's latest shameful comments, again about the Holocaust, where she claims it had nothing to do with race and was an example of white-on-white crime. Despite apologising for similar comments earlier this year, Whoopi told the Sunday Times, "It doesn't change the fact that you could not tell a Jew on a street. You could find me. You couldn't find them. That was the point I was making." Rabbi, welcome to the program. Would you care to give Whoopi a history lesson?
Rita, thank you for being such a great friend of our community and our people. You always have been. But let me just be clear. Whoopi Goldberg, what she's really doing is playing a game of one-upmanship. Who has suffered more is what she's saying. We in the black community, we're identifiable. We can't really hide the color of our skin. We have suffered more. I've learned as a Jew, games of one-upmanship when it comes to human suffering and annihilation are never wise. The black community has suffered immeasurably, as has the Jewish community. The Holocaust was the world's greatest crime. Now, let's just be clear. Hitler...
Now, the Holocaust was the world's greatest crime according to who? You see, there it is. Just by saying that, you are the one who is playing comparative suffering. If every time an atrocity is brought up, the first go-to is always, well, the Holocaust was the worst, then you're the one who's guilty of playing comparative suffering. Because in your eyes, that's how it is. And that's fine. But it is your opinion. If we have to go based on the numbers of people who were killed, or the years the particular atrocity lasted, this is where you fall short. And I think that is all that people like Whoopi, like Dave, to a lesser extent maybe Kyrie and Ye, have been putting forward. It's always this one atrocity has to be considered the worst, and Hitler has to be considered the worst. But that is in your eyes, because your people went through it. What about all the other people that suffered? What about all the people that died under Chairman Mao? What about all the people that died under King Leopold II? Their suffering is not important.
Saw the world in terms of race. His entire Weltanschauung, his worldview was all about race. The Jews were the lowest of the low, the race that needed to be exterminated. Slavs were somewhere in the middle. They only needed to be enslaved. Whoopi Goldberg, I don't think is an anti-Semite. I just think that she's playing a very strange game as to which people have suffered the most, but it trivializes the murder of 6 million people. And when she says, well, you couldn't really pick a Jew out on...
Nobody's trivializing the murder of 6 million people. The problem is that is exactly what people like you are doing. When you say your suffering was the worst, and there are people who have lost several million more, that is exactly what you are doing. You are trivializing the losses within other ethnic groups by saying, well, yes, the Holocaust was the worst. That's precisely what you're doing. And for a rabbi, you should not be so hypocritical.
On the street. Really, Whoopi? Don't you understand that the Nazis portrayed us with giant noses and hook noses and all their Stürmer and all of this disgusting racist garbage had Jews who were unshaven and unkempt? And of course, how could you say you can't pick us out? Look at me. I have a beard and I have a yarmulke. And this is the year 2022. Do you really believe when I walk the streets of Sydney or New York or Los Angeles, you can't pick me out? That's why religious Hasidic Jews are being beaten up in the streets of New York because of the imbecility.
Let me just clarify that. In New York, there are many people, men and women. A lot of the men do not wear the yarmulke. And only in the Hasidic community can you readily pick out a person that is Jewish. Only. There are people that work all over the city. The most recognizable are the men that do wear the yarmulke. Those that don't, you would not know if you saw them walking on the city street. So that statement right there is absolutely incorrect and also, again, hypocritical. At an instant, by looking at Dave Chappelle, Whoopi Goldberg, Kyrie Irving, and Ye, you can tell that they are so-called black. There is no question. Looking at this guy on the screen now with his scruffy beard, with the yarmulke that you cannot see right now, if you did not know who he was, could you tell?
Of what people like Whoopi are saying.
I do wonder why a woman who seems to be so ignorant, deliberately ignorant about Jewish history.
For example, look at these two people on screen right now. She looks maybe a shade paler than him. They seem to both be from the same ethnicity. Now, I don't know if she's Jewish, but how would you be able to tell? If you didn't know he was Jewish before he came on the show and you saw this shot of him, have no idea who he is. Like, nah, man, this guy has a scruffy looking beard. Could you tell that he's Jewish by looking at him?
History appropriated a Jewish name because her real name isn't Goldberg, is it?
Yeah, you know, she was asked about that and she said that she feels that she is Jewish. I know Whoopi. I've been on The View with her many times. I still remember when Michael Jackson was alive, before she started with The View, I remember her calling me. She wanted to connect with Michael Jackson. She wanted to get to know Michael Jackson when I was his rabbi. I never would have suspected then that she would make remarks that are so insensitive. And let's just remember, Holocaust denial or Holocaust degradation is kind of the heart of anti-Semitism, because it really is saying that you Jews overplay the Holocaust. You make too much of it. And why? Maybe because you want to steal Palestinian land, you want to be the victim, maybe because you want to trivialize other people's suffering, maybe because you're trying to shake down the world for compensation. It goes to the heart of anti-Semitism. If 6 million Jews did not die, then anti-Semitism isn't something very scary. It's not something very frightening.
Again, the only person that is trivializing anybody else's suffering is this guy on the screen right here, right now. Nobody else trivializes the Holocaust. I just uploaded a video a couple days ago where a 97-year-old former secretary was convicted of Nazi war crimes. And as I said in that video, the same could not be done for the woman who falsely accused Emmett Till. She was 87, and they refused to indict her, refused to go after her, but a 97-year-old secretary, they went after her. Why? Because the Holocaust is held up as the worst atrocity ever. But that is for you. That cannot be for everybody else whose people have also went through atrocities, which means you're the one that trivializes everybody else's suffering.
But if anti-Semitism leads to gas chambers, then even somewhat insignificant comments like Whoopi Goldberg's are not insignificant at all. They're very, very dangerous.
And particularly given the fact that she apologised just earlier this year for similar comments, and it's apparent that that apology was completely meaningless. She did not mean it. She obviously had to say it just so she can go back on The View. Now, Rabbi, perhaps Whoopi Goldberg would benefit from reading your book, Kosher Hate. Tell me a little bit about this book.
Well, I think she would definitely benefit from even buying my book, Kosher Hate, because she clearly has no hatred of evil. It's a very simple idea. My Christian brothers and sisters say to me that Jesus did not believe in hate. He believed in turning the other cheek. He believed in loving your neighbor. And I always say to them, Jesus said to love your enemy. He never said to love God's enemy. Vladimir Putin, for example, he's not my enemy. I never met the guy. He's God's enemy. He slaughters children. He bombs hospitals and nurseries. Jesus would never have said to love him. Jesus would have said to hate the evil.
So Vladimir Putin is God's enemy. How do you know that? Because he slaughters children. Okay, so if that's what you're going based on, let's take a look at this. This data comes from the UN. More than 200 Palestinians, including more than 50 children, have been killed by Israel in the occupied territories of East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the besieged Gaza Strip in 2022, the deadliest year for Palestinians since 2006. More than. So this is an estimate, but it's more than. More than. So, if that's your argument, that seems like a kind of flawed argument, right? Because that would mean Israel, currently occupied Israel, is also the enemy of God.
That he personifies to combat it, resist it in order to stop it. That's what Hitler represented. When Whoopi Goldberg excuses or minimizes who Hitler was, this is white-on-white violence. You know, we've seen this before. It's not real. It's not racial. She's really saying that Hitler was not as evil as he would appear. That this has happened before, when really Hitler, of course, was the personification of evil. Now, Winston Churchill said, "I hate Hitler." That's why he was prepared to fight him, even at the loss of empire, as opposed to Chamberlain, who was going to appease him.
As I said before, I don't think anybody in the black community tries to minimize the Holocaust. The problem is that people like this man and others, they always hold that up as the worst suffering. But my point here is, for instance, the people that were killed by Chairman Mao, do you think at the time they were being killed, they thought to themselves, oh, you know what, there must be somebody going through something worse at this time, so this is okay? Those that were killed during Stalinism and Leninism, right, or by King Leopold II in the Congo, do you think at that time they were saying to themselves, oh man, you know what, I know somewhere in the world somebody's going to go through something worse at this time, so you know this is okay? No. All these people, when they were being snuffed out, having their very lives destroyed, were scared. They were about to lose their life, and that suffering should not be taken lightly. Because they weren't killed in some sort of service, you know, as heroes. A lot of them were just slaughtered. And I think that's the point that should be emphasized. That's the point that should be made. Nobody's playing a game of comparative suffering but people like him. As long as you keep on saying, well, yeah, that was the worst, then yeah, you're putting your suffering above that of everybody else's. So yes, you are minimizing the suffering of everyone else who has went through these kinds of atrocities. Anyways, that's all I'll say for now. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, share the video, of course. Don't be scared to share it. You know, there's a lot of people that don't want to talk about these things, but it needs to be spoken of. You know, these things really happened. You know, it's fine to discuss them, talk about them, but we're not in the business of comparative suffering. We just don't want it to seem like there's only one people that have suffered in our history, because that is not true. Anyways, until next time, I'm out.